You're listening to Ken Hudnall. This is the Ken Hudnall Show. Coming to you from our studios right here in exciting El Paso, Texas. Gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, today is August the 22nd, 234th day of the year. Just 131 days remain to the year's over with, and we get to start a new one. Holidays and observances? Maybe. Okay. National Eat a Peach Day. It's a enjoyable fruit with a velvety skin and a sweet aroma. National Vowel Day. It's a early celebration, a lively celebration. Happens every August 22nd. This day spotlights bao, a type of steam bun from China. It's got a rich history. Been a favorite of a lot of folks worldwide. World Plant Milk Day. National Take Your Cat to the Vet Day. Be an Angel Day. You don't have to engage in acts of heroism to be somebody's angel. Small acts of kindness throughout your day can change other people's lives in a lot of ways. National Pecan Torte Day. Eggs, sugar, bread, crumbs, vanilla, and of course, pecans. That's all it takes to make a pecan torte. Never Been Better Day. Folklore Day. Rainbow Baby Day. National Surgical Oncologist Day. Antique Tracker Preservation Day. A lot of antiques can be found in out-of-the-way places. International Day commemorating the victims of acts of violence based on religion or belief. We got a lot of that craziness going on. Crayfish Party. National Fishing Month. Sarajevo Film Festival. Largest film festival in Southeast Europe. Navasard. National Aviation Week. Famous people born on this date. James Corden and Gary Grice. Or Grice. Not sure how to pronounce that one. Well, with all that having been said, let's see what stories we have in the news. There's always crazy things happening. Well, the Cracker Barrel change is... a lot of folks have said it's woke, caused a lot of backlash. The logo overhaul, for one thing, it's they're calling it the Bud Light moment of Cracker Barrel. The U.S. has secured a corridor in the Middle East, which was a strategic blow to Iran with a bold Azerbaijan-Armenia pact. This trade corridor deal is a major blow to Tehran. Ayatollah's got some serious issues to deal with. This agreement, which was between these two countries, which was signed earlier this month, grants the U.S. a 99-year lease over the Zangezur corridor. That's a narrow strip of land that serves as a critical trade and energy route to Europe, bypassing Tehran entirely. Iranian-American journalist and dissident Rana Shahzan told Fox News Digital the move is a wonderful gain for the U.S. Delivers a slap in the face to Tehran. The judge, who was so gleeful to hit President Trump with a $500 million fine, had the book thrown at him on appeal. Judge Engoron failed to preserve a single dollar of his original fine against President Trump. He was going to put the president in his place. According to the story that I'm reading, a court revealed that a leading citizen had cooked the books by inflating questionable figures without any support in reality. And his wild overvaluation was widely viewed as motivated by self-aggrandizement. And the report figures are so absurdly inflated, they were rejected in their entirety. In the end, it turns out he was over the true value by $500 million. And that man was Judge Arthur Engoron. The New York appellate court unanimously threw out his absurd $500 million judgment and interest against President Trump. It was Engoron who seemed, as he characterized President Trump's witnesses, as having simply denied reality. He made the independent assessment that Mar-a-Lago was worth between $18 million and $27.6 million. Turns out he was totally off base. All right. One D.C. store owner says President Trump's anti-crime actions may be making the streets safer, but they're hurting sales. All righty. He's citing reduced foot traffic. Was a liquor store, and during a meeting, he said the federal takeover in D.C. has led to reduced foot traffic, which is causing a major blow to his sales. He says it's good in one way, but it actually kills his business. There's nobody around, and people are scared, so they don't want to be hassled, so they all stay home. According to this business owner, who said his name was John, this federal police presence has resulted in a roughly 30 to 40% drop in the store's sales. And of course, that's not a good thing by any means. Well, a former Secret Service agent has warned American travelers about terrorism and crime and kidnapping at a popular vacation destination. It's a U.S. advisory from Mexico. Warns of widespread violent crime, including homicide and carjacking and robbery. They can't get across the border to steal up here, so they wait till we go down there and then they steal. Well, biotech CEO is suing Uber. Turns out that the Uber driver was an illegal immigrant who assaulted him. Well, that assault was caught on camera in downtown Charleston, South Carolina. The individual in question, the illegal immigrant driver, was last name was Nikolevich. Allegedly used a fake driver's license and to get his job as an Uber driver. Later detained by ICE. And the CEO that got beat is suing Uber. The lawsuit filed Monday in Charleston County alleges TC Biofarm CEO Brian Coble, 45, suffered a concussion in April after an Uber driver, an illegal Russian national, attacked him in a King Street restaurant parking lot. And let's see. What else we got? This is a breaking story. The FBI is raiding John Bolton's home. This happened today. I guess you have to say what goes around comes around. Well, there is 6 people who died in a dairy accident in rural Colorado. Southeast Wildfire Protection District crews responded to confined space rescue call. At least 6 bodies were found after this accident took place. That's WELD County Sheriff's Office told Fox the incident doesn't appear to be criminal in nature. Occupational Safety and Health Administration officials confirmed they received notification, but it doesn't say what caused it. This happened near Keansburg, which is about 40 miles northeast of Denver. Well, Democrats are just having a fit over the $8 billion Paramount Skydance merger, cited Trump influence in the canceled Colbert show. So the House Democrats are going to probe the merger. That's according to Adam Schiff, that supporter of law and order. Well, 2 people are dead after eating sandwiches from a food truck. Botulism deaths are raising food truck safety concerns. There's a doctor preaching wellness. Now, I've eaten from food trucks many times in my past. And when the weather's warm, food trucks across the U.S. are doing a thriving business. But unfortunately, there's a deadly outbreak overseas that may give a lot of consumers pause. Now, what is causing all that crackling I hear in my headphones? In Italy, 2 people died in a botulism outbreak linked to a food truck. That's according to the Telegraph. 14 other people had to be hospitalized. This was all in the Calabria region. The 2 victims, Luigi Di Sarno, 52, and Tamara Diacunto, 45, died after eating sandwiches made of sausage and rapini. So the question becomes, are food trucks riskier than restaurants? That's a question that's going to have to be addressed. Well, social media is having quite a hilarious meltdown about Kamala Harris's new book. It's called 107 Days. It's going to be released September 23rd. And her book promotion push is being scored online as nationwide comedy tour. She made the announcement that she was going on tour to promote her new book. It's about her short, failed 2024 presidential campaign against President Trump. Okay. There is a rock star is melted down after the White House calls him washed up. He's raging that President Trump's a low-life fascist. That's the former White Stripes frontman, Jack White, fired back with a lengthy Instagram post. Jesse Waters did a segment on what's going on in Washington, D.C. He says President Trump's giving D.C. a facelift. Well, there's a new opinion. TikTok isn't enough to stop Generation Z from drifting to ALC. Trump has to do 3 things. Tapping into TikTok, and the White House now has a TikTok account. But they want podcasts and campus visits and authentic engagement with their president. problem is you've got liberal educators who take the position without ever having experienced it that things like communism and socialism are the greatest thing since sliced bread. And the students believe it. And they go listen to loudmouths like AOC. I would challenge you to find one picture of her where her mouth isn't open and she's screaming. You're not going to find it. Well, female enlistment has increased under the new military. Military focus has shifted under their new leadership. Well, Hurricane Erin is causing coastal flooding on the East Coast. We're going to have an interesting hurricane season this year. Well, there's been a lot of discussion about Las Vegas. And one casino CEO said dining habits are evolving amid tourism drop. The days of Las Vegas being a place to visit because of cheap buffets is in the past. Last time I went, we had a phenomenal buffet. It cost about $15 a person. Now that same buffet would cost you a lot more than that. And a lot of the cause of it is the wokeness and the craziness of having minimum wage be $20. I remember when I got out of college, minimum wage was $7.25, and that was on the high end. Okay. I'm having system issues this morning. That's, there we go. Well, Fox Corporation is going to have a new streaming service called Fox One. And we've enjoyed streaming from a number of different places over the last, 3 or 4 years. There's a Harvard scientist says a mysterious interstellar object could be a nuclear-powered spaceship. Dr. Avi Loeb points to unusual glow patterns that can't be explained by standard comet behavior. He says this is a rare interstellar object passing through our solar system. And he firmly believes it's more than a comet. The object is called 3I/Atlas, first detected in July by an asteroid terrestrial impact last alert system called Atlas. That's a telescope in Chile. And it marks only the third time an interstellar object has been observed entering our solar system. That's according to NASA. Well, politicians who are trying their best to shield illegal migrants now want to strip ICE of their protections as law enforcement. They're determined to have open borders. Well, an Obama-appointed judge has ruled that Trump appointee Alina Habba is unlawfully serving as a U.S. attorney. Looks to me like we got an individual unlawfully serving as a judge. He's supposed to uphold the law, not make it himself. Well, California Parole Board is going to decide whether Eric Menendez should get out of prison He and his brother killed their parents, allegedly because the parents were abusing the two boys. Well, another story I just discovered. Cracker Barrel stock has taken a nosedive after unveiling their first major logo to redesign in decades. The new people in charge are trying to modernize it and be woke without calling themselves woke. Folks go to Cracker Barrel not because of political philosophy, but because they like the food and they like the atmosphere. Well, there are the Labor Day appliance deals going on at Sam's Club and Amazon and a lot of the other big box stores. Well, Secretary of State Rubio has put the brakes on worker visas after the fatal crash in Florida involving an illegal immigrant trucker who couldn't pass the test in any state but California to get his license. What is... Okay, the Florida Immigration Detention Facility expansion has been blocked by one of God's anointed. Federal judge is blocking the facility called Alligator Alcatraz from expanding. The Florida officials say they're going to appeal, of course. This Florida judge issued a preliminary injunction yesterday, blocking Florida from further expanding Alligator Alcatraz Immigration Detention Center, built in the middle of the Florida Everglades. U.S. District Judge Kathleen Williams, who God has anointed, her injunction formalized a temporary halt she'd ordered 2 weeks ago. And if she's anything like the judges I've dealt with here, you need to find her price sheet and see what it cost to get the decision you want. I had one judge here tell me after our attorney took a bribe to walk away, he said, well, which one of my friends do you want to represent you now? When I said none of them, he had a meltdown. He had friends that needed work. Well, a California resident has contracted the plague after being bitten by a bug while out camping. Well, President Trump's deportation policies have spooked one Pennsylvania city into scrapping immigrant protection vote. The Democratic mayor has removed the welcoming city measure from an agenda after Pam Bondi threatened to pull federal funding for the city. The Mayor Sal Ponto Jr. of Easton, Pennsylvania, who's a moderate Democrat, if there is such a thing, moved to strike the ordinance vote from the agenda with everybody but its sponsor, Councilwoman Taiba Sultana, backing the move. That's according to Lehigh Valley News. One member was absent, probably at home hiding in the closet. You know what I find interesting is none of these people who push all this pro-immigrant claptrap ever invite any of the immigrants to move into their homes to take care of them. No, they want you to do it. They want taxpayer dollars to be used to do it. Well, one of Mayor Adams' aides was caught passing cash to a reporter inside a Lay's potato chip bag. Now, over the years, I've used a lot of Lay's potato chips. I love it, but I've never found money in one of them. Well, social media has erupted after illegal immigrants screamed during a viral D.C. arrest. David Perez Teofani tried to flee when officers approached his vehicle before he was tackled and wrestled to the ground. He was arrested in Washington, D.C. on child sex crime charges in a video that's gone viral. He's a Mexican national named David Perez Teofani. Got out of his vehicles as officers approached and tried to make a break for it. And let's see if the Beach Boys' Brian Wilson's funeral rekindled a long-standing feud between the bandmates. Communist and anti-Israel activists are the members of Mamdani's inner circle. And then finally, there's been a deadly mosquito-borne virus attacking Kansas. And it's still coming up before a peak. We have finished our news segment, unless something unusual happens while the show's on the air. We're going to finish up our week of talking about haunted places. You know, one of the places has quite a reputation. Can be found in Mansfield, Ohio, the Ohio State Reformatory. A lot of folks have said it masquerades as a French castle that aims to reform young male offenders. Ohio State Reformatory was open from 1896 to 1990. Finally closed down due to a class action lawsuit claiming inhumane conditions. You know, the ghosts of these abused boys and from the mid-20th century, hardened adult criminals in maximum security, move furniture and slam doors and throw pebbles at visitors. Guard is killed in solitary confinement, a place called The Hole, in 1932. He still does his rounds, jabbing guests with his nightstick, and figures of shadow and light can be seen, particularly in the attic. You know, there's a lot of strange stories about these places. When you lock up a whole lot of people in a building like that and you mistreat them, some of them don't leave. Then we got Fort Delaware and Pea Patch Island. Gotta love those names. It's in Delaware River. It's Fort Delaware, built in the mid-1800s. During the Civil War, it housed Confederate captives, up to 12,595 at once. Fort was commanded at this point in time by a man nicknamed General Terror, and its history of starvation and sickness and suffocating, overcrowding, plus prisoners fighting over the numerous rats that they wanted to eat because they couldn't get enough food, caused dozens of deaths a day. Well, you can expect anything from a portrait turning into a skull to being prodded by poltergeist, from echoes of Civil War cannons to spirits peering at you from out of darkened corners. They have a 5-hour ghost tour. It's held in October every year. Focuses on some of the more, shall we say, exciting activities that the ghosts indulge in. And ghost tours can be quite a lot of fun as well as educational. I did them here for 20 years until they somebody came up with a brilliant idea pretending to be me and memorizing the stories that I had researched, and he started doing his own tours. He had a strange wife who pretended to be a medium, and she would wheel and throw herself on graves in the very cemeteries and talk about the restless dead. Well, if you wanted education, which I tried to do in my ghost tours, his tours weren't what you needed. His was nothing but silly-ass entertainment. Well, we talked about alligator Alcatraz. Let's talk about the actual Alcatraz Island, which is in San Francisco. It's a favorite spot for dark tourism. It was kind of considered inescapable. During the Civil War, it housed military prisoners, and from 1934 to 1963, it served as a federal prison for incorrigible criminals such as Al Capone and the original Machine Gun Kelly. You know, it's notorious worldwide. It's also notoriously haunted. Centuries old Native American history documents that the White Rock, as it was called, was thronged by evil spirits, and tribal lawbreakers would be banished from the tribe to Alcatraz Island. You know, today, visitors report hearing crying and moaning and deafening clanging, and a malevolent feeling in Starbucks C's laundry room, where hitman Abby Medowitz, known as the Butcher, was killed in the 1940s by a fellow inmate. And the stories don't stop there. While Alcatraz was still operational, guards reported hearing cannon fire and gunshots so real they believed the prisoners were escaping. In the old hospital ward, screams echo from inmates who were secured to a table until they could calm down. And if that didn't work in D Block, which is the most haunted section, man was found strangled in cell 140 back in the 14D back in the 1940s. Rumor has it that the night before, he was screaming that a glowing-eyed monster known as the Thing was trying to kill him. Many visitors report being smothered by a horrific sense of cold, and the smell of is often almost 20 degrees below the rest of the cell block. Also, Alcatraz had a band, and one of the members of the band was Al Capone, played the banjo. And quite often, out of what used to be his cell, you hear somebody playing the banjo. And from all the reports I get, he's not that bad. All right. From Alcatraz, let's go to a place that I find interesting. Graveyards and cemeteries. They've been visiting graveyards and cemeteries has been a popular pastime for centuries. And there's no better time to keep that rich tradition going. We've got several historic cemeteries here in El Paso. One's Concordia Cemetery, and I did tours there until the the local, let's call them the local dilettantes, decided it was a good way for them to make money. One positive thing about touring graveyards is the fresh air and the scenery, history, and quite often wildlife. You can be what's known as a tombstone tourist, which is a time-honored tradition. And medieval pilgrims would often travel around the world to see the graves or the relics of a long-dead saint. Later, the Victorians helped bring the dead and the living together through introduction of garden cemeteries. There'd be footpaths and spaces where you could sit and rest, and decorative trees and unusual architecture. They enabled the public to spend time with their ancestors, enjoying the space as a public park. I remember growing up in a little town in Tennessee, my mother and grandmother would often take time to go to the cemetery and walk around and look at who had died recently and make sure that everything was the way it was supposed to be in the family plot. Cemeteries can teach us a lot about our history, both the bad and the good. And they're an important and irreplaceable link to the past. Visiting and celebrating graves for their artistry and history keeps stories alive and sites open for generations to come. Most cemeteries actually welcome visitors. There are, of course, a few guidelines to help you have a safe and enjoyable experience. When you visit any cemetery, your behavior should be respectful, but especially aware of people attending graves and any interment ceremonies. As you move through the cemetery, you need to be also careful about the fact that land subsidence doesn't put you in the grave with whoever's there. Well, we're going to talk about some of the world's spookiest cemeteries. Cemeteries don't often make the list on tourist must-see places, but some of the greatest and most fascinating and strange places are actually burial places. Let's talk about Highgate Cemetery in London. Located on a hill above the city, Highgate's a Victorian love letter to death, so to speak, and memorialization for centuries. London's burial grounds and churchyards had been busting at the seams. Graveyards had become death traps, so to speak, and the smells from some of the sites were unbearable and seen as a danger to public health. The ever-growing city needed a new and dignified solution to their soaring number of bodies. And so in 1839, Highgate Cemetery opened up, so there were new places to bury folks. It was on the outskirts of London. It was but one of several large cemeteries that are open around the capital city, offering large and upmarket burial spaces that were not attached to a church. Today, these cemeteries are called the Magnificent Seven and are some of the most dramatic burial sites in the UK. You know, Highgate was so fashionable. It expanded in 1856, adding an East Cemetery. The East Cemetery is more modern and opened while still retaining a sense of Victorian grandeur. Everything had to be ornate during the Victorian era to keep in with the desires of Queen Victoria. It houses the mortal remains of countless celebrities and people of note, including the poet Christina Rossetti, novelist George Eliot, and controversial Karl Marx. His tomb, depicting an enormous likeness of his own head, has been subjected to vandalism and bomb threats since it opened up in 1956. The West Cemetery is a true temple of Victorian architectural excess. Paths take visitors past enormous mausoleums, life-size lions, dogs, huge angels, before passing through the what's called the Egyptian Avenue and a ring of mausoleums called the Circle of Lebanon. Previously topped with a 280-year-old cedar tree, was removed and replaced in 2019. You know, superstitions surrounding Highgate's spooky roots exist to this day, aided by the Highgate vampire controversies from the 1970s. You know, throughout the decade, a media storm surrounded the then overgrown cemeteries, where reports of supernatural activity, grave desecration, and even a story of an ancient vampire being up and around were rife. Then from Highgate in London, let's go to Glasgow, Scotland. Glasgow Necropolis. You know, opened in 1833. The Glasgow Necropolis is a real city of the dead that looks up one of Scotland's largest cities. Following the 1832 British Cemeteries Act, businesses were able to open large private cemeteries that were not only non-religious, but they were actually for profit. Glasgow was one of the first cities to announce it was opening in its own private cemetery. The necropolis proved so popular that by 1851, all 37 acres of land were full. There were 50,000 interments. Not all with headstones, of course. Cemetery has been closed for new burials for decades. It was always intended as a welcoming place for visitors. It attracts a lot of visitors to this day. The paths of this Victorian cemetery snake upwards, leading not to a grave, but to a huge statue of John Knox, the founder of Scottish Presbyterianism. Knox's statue predates the cemetery, having been erected in 1825, but provided a clear focal point around which the architects could plan the layout of the cemetery. Main entrance to the necropolis is a old structure. It's actually outside the cemetery walls. There's a small river called the Melindinar Burn. Needs to be crossed to enter the cemetery. Kind of like crossing the river Styx, wouldn't you say? This reminded a lot of Victorian visitors of crossing the River Styx, which is how that rumor got started. It's the boundary between this world and the rest, and was a sure sign to show due respect to its silent inhabitants. The bridge was completed in 1836 and became the main path for funeral processions, where it gained the nickname the Bridge of Sighs. Then from Glasgow, let's go to Paris. Père Lachaise, opened in 1804, is the world's first garden cemetery and the first civic cemetery in Paris. And while tourists clamored to visit its famous residence, the cemetery didn't always enjoy such fame. Père Lachaise was founded by First Consul Napoleon Bonaparte, who decided drastic measures are required to negate overcrowded city churchyards. 1799, a competition was announced challenging the city planners to find a solution by designing a new cemetery. Ultimately, the winner was Alexandra Theodore Brogniart, who transformed the hilly area in the west of Paris into a beautiful maze. The new concept attracted a lot of tourists, but a lot of locals they weren't really sure if they wanted their loved ones buried outside the city limits. However, the directors came up with a publicity campaign boasting they held the remains of celebrated French poet and playwright Molière. His body had been buried out of service at the king's request and was then disinterred by the revolutionary government in 1792. They stored him in a national museum. In 1817, his bones were removed and buried at Père Lachaise, but the provenance was uncertain. They were somebody's bones. They may or may not have been his. Well, the director's campaign worked, and today over 1 million people are buried at this cemetery. Visitors often visit Père Lachaise to pay homage to specific graves. Such creative icons as Jim Morrison, Oscar Wilde, and Frederick Chopin are all buried inside its walls. Oscar Wilde's enormous stone tomb is visited by thousands of adoring fans throughout the year. This Irish playwright died in 1900, penniless and in exile. His elaborate tomb was constructed exclusively on donations from friends and admirers. For decades, his grave was covered in messages of love, surrounded by an explosion of lipstick kisses. But in 2014, a protective glass barrier was installed. Then we got in Savannah, Georgia, Colonial Park and Bonaventure Cemetery. Now, Savannah is often cited as one of the USA's most haunted cities. Actually, in my opinion, the most haunted city is El Paso. But Savannah runs at a close second. And it's no wonder its cemeteries are bursting with spooks. Colonial Park Cemetery is the oldest burial ground in the city. Had its first permanent resident in 1750. Cemeteries countless interesting and thought-provoking gravestones, including Revolutionary War soldiers, victims of the yellow fever epidemic, and historical figures such as Button Gwinnett, a signatory to the Declaration of Independence. Now, some visitors reported hearing strange voices, seeing shadow people, and the ghost of infamous murderer Rene Rondelet. Reportedly, he was convicted of murder and hung from a tree inside the cemetery. People claim to have seen him still hanging or even wandering around among the graves. Bonaventure Cemetery was established in 1846 as one of the most beautiful cemeteries in the country. Its banks of magnolia and dogwood create a magical atmosphere, but it also has its fair share of spooky goings-on. There were reports of children's laughter being heard and babies' cries, and even a snarling pack of wild dogs has been heard inside the cemetery grounds. The grave of 6-year-old Gracie Watson is particularly popular with visitors. They often bring her toys and coins, put them beside a statue resembling the child. Some claim to have seen Gracie herself, wandering through the cemetery, searching for something. Then in Baltimore, Maryland, we got Westminster Burying Ground, established in 1786. Westminster Burying Ground is one of the oldest places we're going to be talking about. It's attached to a church, as so many graveyards were. It's actually considered a graveyard or a burial ground rather than a cemetery. It contains a veritable who's who of Baltimore history. Countless heroes of the 1812 and Revolutionary Wars are buried inside Westminster, including General Sam Smith, James McHenry, and James Buchanan. However, it seems to be more mysterious burials that tend to excite visitors. Following writer Edgar Allan Poe's mysterious sudden death in 1849, his burial could never be viewed as a simple affair. He was originally buried in an unmarked grave at the back of the grounds and remained there for decades until in 1875, local school children raised money for a memorial to a fundraising effort called Pennies for Poe. Children were hugely successful in their project. A memorial to the late poet was built at the entrance to the grounds. His body was disinterred and reburied beside his wife, Virginia, and his mother-in-law, Maria. Despite having a grand memorial, a lot of locals believe Poe still restlessly wandering the graveyard, doomed to wander for eternity. But the burial ground is also home to the terrifying Screaming Skull of Cambridge, purportedly the skull of an unknown murdered minister. It's said to be encased in cement with its jaw bound shut in an attempt to stifle its blood-curdling screams. According to legend, the skull would scream relentlessly and sounded so horrific in nature that the sounds would torment the minds of those who hear it, sending them into madness. So they did what they could to shut the skull up. Then we go to Easton, Connecticut, Union Cemetery. Found in the early 1700s, Union Cemetery is a beautiful historical burial ground, and it's said to be home to countless ghosts and ghouls. This infamous site was once deemed evil and demonic by famous paranormal investigators and self-styled demonologist Ed and Lorraine Warren. If you never read any of their stuff, after you read my books, you need to go read theirs. Majority of haunting reports from this cemetery relate to the White Lady, a lonely female spirit in a white gown or wedding dress. She's said to wander around the cemetery and out on the nearby road, cause motorists to swerve or crash their vehicles, believing that they'd hit a pedestrian, only for the lady to completely disappear when the drivers got out of their cars. And a number of other paranormal reports vary, but some of the most chilling are from a spirit or demon called Red Eyes. Several visitors reported a sensation of being watched or feeling a stranger's hot breath against their necks. When they turn around, they're met with a pair of horrible, glowing red eyes staring back at them from a distance. That would tend to disrupt your day. Well, let's go to Christ Church in Barbados, the Chase family vault. Within the churchyard of the Christ Church Parish Church sits some of the most infamous coffins in the world. The Chase family vault, not known for its grand architecture or for the achievements of the people buried there, but for the fact that its coffins move around. Well, according to legend, Chase family bought the gravesite in 1724 after the death of 2-year-old Anne. The body was put in a lead-lined coffin and laid to rest inside the vault. She was joined shortly after by other family members, including her sister Dorcas, and a month later by their father Thomas. Well, as the cemetery workers readied the vault for Thomas to join his daughters, they began to move the huge slab that covered the entrance and found everything inside was not as it was supposed to be. Coffins had been neatly stacked up in the vault when they were buried, were now jumbled and resting against the walls at strange angles. Now, this entire time, the vault had been sealed. Nobody had been inside, so the question became how the coffins could have moved about. So they were all reset with Thomas neatly added to the vault. A year later, they reopened it again for another coffin, and cemetery workers found the vault in the same state of disarray it had been when Thomas was buried. No sign of human interference. Again and again, the same process happened, and even after leaving a layer of sand to detect the footprints of any intruders, the mystery persisted. Eventually, the Chase's wandering coffins were too much for the cemetery, and they were reburied someplace else. To date, their vault sits empty, but there are a lot of spooky stories circulating about the moving coffins. Even the government of the island got involved, but nobody could figure out what had happened. Well, on that note, we come to the end of today's show. And since this is Friday, we'll be back on Monday with a new topic. Until then, this is Ken Hudnall for the Ken Hudnall Show saying have a truly great weekend.